At 10 a.m. local time on February 28, 2026, the Middle East entered a state of total war. Within a 12-hour window, U.S. and Israeli forces executed nearly 900 coordinated strikes across the Iranian landscape. The objective was a decapitation strike. By targeting the supreme leader and top IRGC commanders directly, the mission aimed to sever the central nervous system of the state in a single morning. Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump framed the operation as an existential necessity. They cited intelligence suggesting Iran was weeks away from a nuclear breakout, arguing that waiting for a smoking gun was no longer a viable option. While the official record maintains this was a defensive necessity, the timing of the strike invites a closer comparison with the rhetoric of the preceding decades. This timeline tracks the consistency of the warning. Since 1992, Benjamin Netanyahu has stood before the international community to claim Iran was weeks or months away from a weapon, a warning repeated in 2012 and again in the lead-up to the 2026 conflict. But the 2026 claim exists alongside a specific historical context. Following the 12-day war in June 2025, both Washington and Tel Aviv declared the Iranian nuclear program obliterated, making the return to a weeks-away emergency 8 months later a point of intense debate. Under international law, the standard for preemption is defined by the Caroline test. It requires a threat to be instant, overwhelming, and leaving no moment for deliberation. Legal scholars point to the status of Iran's infrastructure at the time of the strike. With the primary enrichment centers already in ruins from the previous year's war, the requirement for an instant and overwhelming emergency becomes difficult to verify. If the physical threat had indeed been neutralized the year prior, the focus of the 2026 conflict shifts from the bunkers of Tehran to the domestic crises facing the leaders who launched it. In political science, the diversionary war theory suggests that a leader facing severe domestic pressure may initiate a foreign conflict to shift public focus and consolidate power. By early 2026, Prime Minister Netanyahu's multi-year corruption trial had reached a critical phase. Facing charges of bribery and fraud, the Prime Minister was being required to provide frequent and high-stakes testimony in open court. Just weeks before the February strikes, Netanyahu formally requested a presidential pardon from Isaac Herzog. On March 11th, the Justice Ministry recommended against it, noting the Prime Minister's refusal to admit guilt. The escalation of the war effectively froze this legal process. Citing classified diplomatic and security grounds, the courts accepted requests to delay the trial hearings indefinitely. Operation Epic Fury provided a total legal shield, transitioning Netanyahu from a criminal defendant into a wartime commander vital for national survival. A similar timeline of domestic pressure was unfolding in Washington. Throughout January 2026, the Department of Justice began the most significant release of the Jeffrey Epstein archives in history. The release was unprecedented in scale, 3.5 million pages of documents, including thousands of images and videos. The sheer volume of data put the White House under intense daily investigative scrutiny. Throughout February, the president's past ties to Epstein dominated the news cycle. The domestic scandal had become the primary narrative, severely threatening the administration's political standing. On February 28th, that narrative was replaced. The launch of the war allowed the president to invoke commander-in-chief powers, triggering a powerful rally-round-the-flag effect that traditionally drowns out domestic scandals in favor of national security. The synchronization of military action effectively buried millions of pages of investigative evidence beneath a permanent wave of wartime headlines. While the political pressure eased in Washington and Jerusalem, the situation on the ground in the Middle East diverged from the surgical success promised by the military. The decapitation strike failed to force a surrender. Iran's military followed a mosaic defense, a decentralized structure where local units operate independently. This allowed for the immediate succession of Mojtaba Khamenei, ensuring the state's military apparatus remained operational despite the loss of its top leadership. Iran responded by closing the Strait of Hormuz. By blocking this geographic bottleneck, they placed an economic chokehold on global energy supplies, causing oil prices to climb vertically past $100 a barrel. The human cost was defined by the tragedy at Menob. A Tomahawk missile struck the Shajara Tayyabeg Girls' Primary School. In a double-tap strike, a second missile hit the school's prayer room as students were being moved there for safety, killing over 165 children. The operation did not end a threat. It ignited a region-wide conflict characterized by catastrophic human failure and a global economy pushed to the brink. The convergence is exact. The supposed peak of the Iranian nuclear threat mirrored the peak of two separate domestic legal crises in Washington and Jerusalem. By stretching the definition of an imminent threat to address political vulnerabilities, leadership pushed international law into deeply contested territory. When the boundary between a preemptive strike and a political shield is erased, the ultimate price is paid by the civilians on the ground.